guys, welcome back to the High Grade podcast. It's your girl Shannel
And Shannel.
And today's topic of conversation is, how do you deal with failure? So let's kick it off nice and quick, nice and sweet. Shan, have you ever had to deal with failure?
No.
Really?
I'm joking. Obviously, of course.
In what situation?
It's hard to think. Probably just in everyday life, just in terms of, obviously, when I was on my property journey trying to get houses and people telling us no, going on viewings and people not taking the rooms, failing exams.
Have you failed an exam? You seem like a really studious person.
I wouldn't say fail, but like failure to me, if I'm trying to reach for that A star and I get like a, or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
But like an A star and I get like an A or a B. Like when I did, so for my A levels, I wanted to study law in Birmingham. And to get that, I needed A star, AA. And I got 3 Bs at A level. To me, I failed. If anyone remembers A level results day, like I was sobbing, like uncontrollably, like my life was over.
Yeah.
That to me, like that was a fail. I had chickenpox in my defence when I did my A levels, so I wasn't
at your big age. You had
chickenpox. Yeah. So I have like this thing where like stress makes me ill.
Okay.
So when I'm stressed, it's like, so every exam seasons, when I did my GCSEs, I had a liver infection. When I did my AS levels, I had kidney infection, and then for A levels, I got chickenpox. So like,
I know it was so long ago. But how did you deal with it? And I guess in the everyday smaller failures that you face now, how do you deal with that?
I think for me, well, I spent the whole day and probably the next day sobbing, even though to someone else and to other people, they were like, no, it's good. But when I have like, I'm very like, and I like to plan ahead. So in my head, I was going to go to Birmingham, obviously get a great degree, move on and blah, blah, blah. So I genuinely felt my life was over.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I needed to have that time where I just cried and was upset, like, and just embraced kind of the emotions that I had, because I did work so hard and obviously I had my mind set on going, and obviously that didn't happen. So I think when you do experience failure and you are kind of upset, kind of embrace that emotion, because it's okay. It's not abnormal. Everyone kind of is going to experience failure and be upset about it. So definitely embrace failure and embrace the emotions. But then also, once you have kind of had that moment where you've got it out of your system, you've had a bit of a cry or you've been angry, kind of just reflect and think, okay, what are my other options? How can I bring this back? Because even though I didn't go to the university that I wanted, everything happens for a reason. On reflection now, I probably think it was actually a wise decision, because obviously in my second year of uni, I decided to start a business and I actually was living from home. Yeah. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was in Birmingham and travelling from like London or Kent to Birmingham. So yeah, I think embrace the emotions, but also know God has a plan for everyone, and things will eventually, if you work hard enough, everything will work out in your favour in the end.
100%. Maybe a more recent time, I guess, where I've faced failure, if you like. So I was on a Teach First graduate program. So Teach First, if you're not sure, is basically a teacher training program where it says that it takes the best graduates and puts them in challenging schools, and you train to be a teacher. So rather than taking the more traditional route, you essentially train on the job. So I did Teach First. Yeah. But when I did that, I think for me, my intention was probably to stay in teaching for 2 years, and Teach First has partners with like PwC, Goldman Sachs, so all of the big companies in the business finance sector. And obviously my degree was in business and finance, so I thought, okay, it makes sense. I'll just kind of do this. I'll get all of the transferable skills from being a teacher, and then I'll just transition really nicely into sort of a role at PwC, for example, and do consulting. And I think I had almost told myself that that's what I was going to do. When PwC grad programs opened, they had a special application process for people who came from Teach First. So I would always go through their application process, and I would never get through to the last round. Something would always happen where I wouldn't get through, and for me it was so frustrating, because it was like, I don't think I want to be in teaching. I'm sure I want to be at PwC, but why the hell am I not getting shortlisted to the last round? And I think for me it was very much so, I guess, really disappointing, because I had told myself, like, I'm not in teaching for the long run, like I'm here for 2 years and I'm bouncing. But then all of the other options that were available to me were basically saying, no, we don't want you. And it was like, I didn't know how to deal with that that type of rejection almost.
How did it make you feel? Do you think you were a bit like, not self-conscious, but you maybe had a bit of self-doubt, that you felt you weren't like worthy? Like, what were your thoughts then?
Not that I wasn't worthy, and probably not self-doubt, but I think for me, I had in my head from the very beginning, I guess, that the only reason why I had trained to be a teacher was so that I could have an entry point into PwC, Goldman Sachs, etc. But then obviously once I got into the job, I ended up loving it, ended up loving the kids, loving the experience, and just finding a real passion for helping and educating young people. So I feel like when I then started applying for all of these roles at PwC, Goldman Sachs, it was almost like my heart wasn't in it, which is probably now on reflection and in hindsight, probably why I wasn't getting the job. But I think in many cases, even in day-to-day, when you do face failures, for me, it's always reframing failure. So rather than seeing it as a failure, which is very easy to do, I think training yourself and understanding that it's not a failure, but rather it's an experience. When we look at it from the lens of experience rather than it being a failure, it almost changes the dynamic of the situation. So not that you failed at something, which therefore means you're a failure, but actually I've experienced something and it's made me better. Maybe in the short term, when you're in the moment, it doesn't necessarily feel like that, but I think, like you said, everything happens for a reason, and whether you're religious or not, whether you are sort of aligned with energy and you believe in the law of attraction, things do happen for a reason. And I guess it's not really for you to understand, but it's for you to understand what you can gain from that negative experience per se, and how can you implement it into your life and inform your next decision moving forward. Because I imagine people go for jobs all the time and they don't necessarily get the job, or people will fail an exam, and I think once you fail once, failure almost becomes a little bit easier to deal with, if that makes sense. If you're dealing with it or facing it for the first time, it can be quite shattering and can almost feel like your world is falling apart.
I think, like you said, it's looking at failure and not being scared of it for one, but also not thinking it's a really bad thing, because it's not. You almost need to expect failure, because no one's going to have like 100% success rate
100%
in anything they do, whether it's you, I don't know, go into the supermarket and expecting everything to be like, I don't know, that's a bad example, but whatever. But do you know what I mean?
That was definitely off the cuff.
It was off the cuff. But do you know what I mean? We don't just mean like going for like a really big goal, like achieving 3 A stars at A level, just in day-to-day life, like the small failures and the kind of the experiences. It's not a bad thing. I think you need to experience failure to have that real kick up the backside, to kind of just like, okay, so someone told me no, or I haven't done as well as I thought I would do. This didn't go to plan. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick myself back up, dust myself off, and go again. Even if we look at babies when they're walking, babies will obviously anyone that's kind of been around them, they stand up and they fall to the ground. They try and stand up again, try and take a few steps, and they fall to the ground. Why can't we be more like them, who every time we fall we get back up? Because if a baby falls to themselves, do you know what, I can't do this walking thing because I keep failing. I'm done. You're never going to be able to walk. But I think sometimes as we get older, we just become more stubborn and we become our own worst enemy, because young children and kids, they fail over and over again, but they just get back. Like, it's just very easy. They just do it again and they do it again and they do it again until they're able to do it. But as we get older, we just become our own worst enemy in terms of not having that same mindset that we did when we were young.
I think a lot of it as well is to do with the other feelings that you, I guess, are in touch with once you face failure. Because I think a lot of people, when they face failure, feel embarrassed, feel ashamed, they feel not worthy or not good enough. But actually it's like, embarrassed for who?
For what?
Ashamed for who and for what? Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, you're doing this thing that you wanted for you and you only. And so don't see it as you're letting anyone down, just see it as an experience. If I use a very recent example, I guess for the last maybe 5 years, I've been trying to like create businesses. So in my head, I'm probably thinking about 2 or 3 failed businesses in my head, and all of them have been trying to do it with friends, but from each experience I've learned something. So just to give you an example, one of my good friends and I, we were going to start like a business together. So she's really like arty, very in touch with her creative side, and she's amazing. So we were going to start a leather goods company where she was going to personalize things, so she could paint like just the maddest things, and you look at it and you're like, did you really paint that? So yeah, she was going to hand paint like wallets and like Louis Vuitton bags and things like that. And that was going to be like our thing. Literally built the website, incorporated the company, dropped loads of money in it without actually having a plan of action. That failed within, well, I wouldn't say it failed, but that didn't go to plan. Maybe like a month we invested in it and like nothing happened. And then learning from that, when we started our business, Elevate, we didn't incorporate, we didn't have a website, we didn't drop any money into the business until we had our first client.
Yeah.
And didn't we say like, we're not going to spend no money on this business until we know that it's viable, where someone's willing to pay for our services? And I think that in itself is a huge learning experience. Had I not gone through that experience with my friend, once we came up with the idea, I would have been like, let's incorporate the company, let's buy the domain, let's get email addresses, let's do all of the nice, exciting things prior to actually creating a viable business, essentially. And I feel like that is such a vivid example for me, where I haven't seen that failed business as a failure, just more so as a learning experience. Because had I not gone through that, we probably would have been all guns blazing, dropped loads of money with no client, ready to go, and we'd be just here looking at each other like, yeah, we've put X and Y Z amount of money into the business.
Now what? Because
Yeah.
I think sometimes you just get excited. Obviously you've got this amazing idea and you're putting your hard-earned money into it.
Yeah.
And then it goes wrong and you're just out of pocket.
Yeah. I think as well, like when it does come to failure, I think a lot of us psychologically, we just don't know how to deal with failure when it happens to us the first time round. What we do is we say things like, oh, I didn't want the job anyway. Yeah. Oh, I didn't really want it.
Oh, what do boys do when they chat out girls and she says no? Oh, she's
spotted
anyway.
Yeah, so even things like that, I think we obviously use that as a coping mechanism to try and make ourselves feel better, which I think is fine, you know, when the cut is very fresh. But in my opinion, it's very important to not do that, because I feel like you should absolutely be in touch with the raw emotion of what it was like to fail or feel like a failure, because that for me is almost like a boost of motivation. Let's just take it for a job, for example. If you do fail, it's so easy to say, oh, well, I didn't really want the job anyway. Well, actually, that energy that you're holding right now in your system, in your body, the fact that, oh, you didn't really want the job right now, that's probably the reason why you kind of didn't get it in the first place, because you didn't fully commit yourself. It's just ensuring that you are fully in touch with the wide range of emotions that comes with failure, and maybe just having a private conversation with yourself in your head and just thinking, okay, how did I get to this point? What happened? What could I have done better? When we do face failure, it's easy to say, okay, forget it, I'm not going to do that anymore. Oh, I'm not going to apply for a job in that industry anymore, because it's clear that after this first experience, I'm not good enough. But why? Why would you look at it like that? Just see it as, do you know what? Maybe this job, they didn't see the potential that I had. Maybe they were blind to how good I am, or maybe they just weren't ready for my sauce.
Yeah. But do you know what? It's even a case of just being like real and upfront with yourself. Maybe like you weren't good enough for the job. That could be a reason. And it's just a case of being like, okay, have the emotional side, experience what it feels like to actually fail and the feelings that come with failure, knowing that you don't ever want to go back to feeling like that, and then just be constructive and kind of just, like you said, have a conversation with yourself. Or if you've got a good bunch of people around you, like, it's not embarrassing to fail. Like I'd rather try and fail rather than not trying at all. And I think you should, if you're too embarrassed to kind of have the conversation with your friends because you think they're going to be happy that you failed or whatnot, then you need new friends. But that's another episode that we've already done. So I just think being constructive, sometimes you might try to do something and you, like you said, you haven't fully committed yourself, and it's just being real with yourself and having that conversation of, okay, so what could I have done differently to make sure I succeed? Because some things are out of our control, but some things are not. Some things are in our control. And if we actually look at ourselves and think, okay, so let's look at this situation. Where could I have done things differently? Where could I have kind of improved? Where could I have made sure that this wasn't a failure and actually a success?
But I think that takes a certain caliber of person to be able to do that, because I think that requires real self-awareness and understanding of you. Yeah. If that makes sense, because it's not an easy conversation to have with yourself, whether you write it down or not, and just understanding where is it that went wrong. And like you said, maybe actually you weren't qualified enough for the job. So what can you do to move forward so that the next job you do go for, you're more than qualified?
Yeah. I think that's exactly it.
And that's just the conversations that we need to have with ourselves before anything. Maybe just have a better understanding of how you reflect just on a day-to-day. You know, it doesn't have to be in that very traditional way. Everyone has their own way of kind of like sitting down, being at peace. It could be while you're in the shower, it could be while you're driving, you know, when you just before bed, when you have multiple thoughts running through your mind. I think take the time to actually acknowledge those thoughts and maybe even write it down and say, okay, maybe this is what happened, or maybe this was the catalyst as to why it didn't go right for me. And then don't just accept it and do nothing. I think you have to accept it and then plan, cool, what's next?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so easy to fail and then just be like, all right, cool, I'm not doing that again. I'm never going to touch that again.
And I think it's so easy to feel just sorry for ourselves as well, and just be like, poor me, like I feel really sorry for myself. Yeah. And I think it's just changing your mindset. It's okay to have them feelings, because we can sit there and say don't have them, but we have them. Like, failure does hurt and you do get upset, you might cry, you might be angry, you might whatever. So embrace them feelings, but don't harbour them forever. Just don't have that negative energy. Yeah. Eventually you just have to let go and then be constructive. Okay, what can I do better next time? Where did I go wrong? Yeah. How can I make sure next time is success?
If you are that person who does harbour feelings, the only person you're impacting is you, because a company who you may want to work for, they're not going to bother. A qualification that you might want, the examiners aren't going to bother. Do you know what I mean? The only person it's affecting is you. And I think you are, again, your own worst enemy. You are the one that puts that barrier up. And if you are putting that barrier up, who are you doing that for? Because it's not going to affect anyone else but you. And I think there are loads of people that experience failure, but then they're just, I guess, completely heartbroken and never want to kind of go at it again. Almost that feeling of being scared. But just think about all of the opportunities you're missing out on if that is the way that you deal with things. And no one can say that they're a failure. You can be regretful. You can maybe say, okay, maybe I didn't put my all into it, but I don't think you can class yourself as a failure, because you're a success, or you're good at something.
Yeah.
Do you know what 100%. I mean? So I guess just to close it off then, as we always do, last word, tip, advice, action for anyone watching who probably maybe has faced failure recently, or maybe is that type of person who doesn't deal with failure very well.
Go back to being a kid. I think that's the best advice I can give, because I think even if you don't remember for yourself, if you watch younger siblings or just anyone around you that's younger, even in a park, I'm not saying go to a park and watch kids, that's weird, but just you'll see them kind of fail and get back up and do it again, and with no fear, no embarrassment, no shame, no nothing. And I think sometimes it's just worth kind of, we forget as we get older and we become more stubborn and more self-conscious, but just to go back to what it was like to be a kid and to experience just failing and just getting back up straight away and just trying again.
It's like almost we want to keep a status and a name to ourselves, which is why we don't want to try again.
Yeah, because it's just not being scared of failure. Like, if you're scared of failure, you're going to hold yourself back so much, because everything that you do that is challenging, there's going to be an element of failure. You've got a 50% chance of winning, and I don't want to even say failing, but obviously not going to plan. Yeah.
But I think even saying that, who even wants to try and do something where the success rate is 100%? That's boring.
That's too easy. Yeah. Like that's what I said. You're cheating yourself. Like, you're not reaching to your full potential if you are just doing something because it's easy. Like, I can go run outside for 100 meters and I know I'm going to be able to do it and come back in. But if I really wanted to challenge myself, I would do a marathon. Like, in my head, I'm thinking, I can't do that. There's a 50% chance of me not finishing a marathon, but do you know what I mean? There's a 50% chance of me doing it. And I just think if you're letting failure be a reason why you actually don't go and try to do something, I think you just need to have a conversation with yourself and just thinking, is this what you want from your life? Are you happy right now in the situation that you're in or what you're doing, and blah blah blah? And if you're not, then just get out of your own way and just do 100%,
it. 100%.
And you, back at you?
I think I've approached this episode with a very teacher hat on, and
I think you approach every episode with that teacher hat.
Do you know what? It's hard to just turn it off. It really is hard. But I think so. This is a concept that I always sort of tell my kids, and it's about having a growth mindset. And this was sort of like a concept pioneered by someone called Carol Dweck. I think it's probably an episode that I want to base it's probably something that I want to have a full episode about, but essentially it's having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is that, you know, you're always going to be here at this level, but then a growth mindset is understanding that we're all capable of growth, we're all capable of being better. And I think having a growth mindset is automatically having a growth mindset will mean that you automatically say to yourself, okay, I face failure, but what next? How can I be better? Whereas that fixed mindset is always in the case of, okay, I wasn't able to achieve that. Okay, do you know what? I'm going to go back into my hole and I'm never going to come out again. So I think trying to foster that growth mindset. So I think maybe obviously do a little bit of research, have a look into growth mindset, and just see what are the things that we can do or that you can do that will start to foster a growth mindset. And I think one thing that my partner actually asked me maybe a few months ago, and I think he's probably asked you, is what would you regret? What would you regret not starting today, 1 year from now? And I think that's such a wide question and can mean anything to anyone. But if you are someone who has faced failure recently, if you are someone who's faced failure recently, ask yourself that question, because 1 year from now, if you don't try again at that thing that you failed at, are you going to sort of beat yourself up about it? Because if you are, then you need to be fostering a growth mindset and just go again. Yeah. Just go again until you can't go no more is for me. And I think there's that balance of, at what point do I keep going? And then at what point should I just stop and quit, basically? Should I quit or stick? But only you can answer that question. And so that would be my last word, tip, or advice.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for listening. As usual, please hit the subscribe button. Follow us on Instagram at the High Grade Podcast, and also our own Instagrams at ShannelB_
and Shannel__.
And make sure you rate and review the podcast, because lots of you listen and not enough of you are giving us some love.
It's true. Okay. Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.